Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.
Waheguru Ji Ki
Waheguru Ji
Fateh.
Ki Fateh. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much
Thank you for inviting me.
thank you for sitting down with us and having this conversation. I think it's very important that we get, especially first generations perspective of life, of how life has been, being in the Dharma, Sikhi, and so on and so forth, and what comes to be. So I always start off with, where you were born and raised, what kind of life did you have growing up? And I'm always finding that a lot of individuals who I've been speaking to, they all, not all, a majority of them always say, I always wanted to get into nunhood. I always wanted to become a priest or something. But I'm not putting a seed into anything. But I just want to know.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
so many people.
Yeah. I would love to know. So where you're from, how life was growing up, and parents, and so on and so forth.
So just from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Okay. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, in John Kennedy's congressional district. And my mother received a letter from him congratulating her on the birth of her daughter, which of course he sent to every single parent that was in that district. But I never saw a copy of this letter because my mother lost it. But anyway, so I'm, Boston born and grew up in the suburbs of Boston. My dad taught at Harvard. He was an interesting character. Both my parents, I guess everybody's parents are interesting characters. My youth was shaped mostly by my father's deep love for Iran, interestingly enough. That's so in the news.
Wow.
That was his chosen field. He always used to say, I'm more Iranian. He would say to Iranians who are like a lot of Iranian students, and he would say to them, I'm more Iranian than you are because I chose it and you were born into it. So, because he loved every aspect. I mean, it's a beautiful culture. It's an ancient civilization. It's incredible poetry and culture. And I have nothing but good things to say about this country. And I lived there for 4 years. And that really, I feel like, is probably the most defining aspect of my childhood. I mean, I was 13 and I had a nice, ordinary childhood in the burbs. But going to Iran when I was 13 years old changed my life, changed my view of the world, changed my experience. Very precious memories.
It's funny that you say about, he chose Iranian, the Iranian culture, well as they were born into it, because I find that very much in Sikhi. That I was born into Sikhi, well as, you guys, you like yourself, you went in to Sikhi.
Right.
So, I desperately do want to touch on to that. But is first, I guess my first question is, what did your father teach in Harvard? And secondly, what exactly is, what gives you that beautiful goldy pigmentation? What culture are you from?
I like to say maybe it was the postman. I don't know. Because I do look really different than my brothers are highly, pink colored, and I look at pictures of me as a kid and I'm like, wow, I look so different than them. I don't know. My mother always said we have some kind of Mediterranean, blood and stuff. So I guess that's what came out.
Wow. Okay.
In my case.
Okay. And what was your father a professor in?
He was a professor of Iranian studies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. But that included language, religion, kind of all archaeology, all the aspects. I mean, he really was, so he was an Iranologist. Did you know there's such a field?
Wow. No.
Yeah.
So your father was a professor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was a professor.
Yeah.
And what did your mother do?
My mother was quite the interesting character. She had, they met at Harvard. She was an editor for some Oriental journal or something. And my father had kind of connections with a lot of different departments at Harvard. And one of them was she was in some like the Far Eastern department or something like that.
Right.
And so somehow they met, and that was, and she should have carried on. My mother's really, it's interesting. My father was a professor, but my mother was more of a teacher than he was. And she taught various things, but never in a very formal way, and didn't pursue a career in that. So she was always teaching. Like when she would raise her 3 kids, I felt like we were always getting lectured on things. It was like, okay, Mom, we're not your students, please, cut the, but she just needed to pontificate on everything. Yeah, she was interesting.
So how many siblings do you have?
2. I have 2 brothers, and actually I have a half brother. My parents divorced when I was in high school. My father remarried, married an Iranian lady, as a matter of fact. And so I have a half brother. Nels, he's about 20 something years younger than me.
Right.
We're not close, but maybe someday we'll
Okay.
reconnect. But yeah,
Fantastic.
my older brother passed away in 2011. He was a Sikh. Sapurka Singh.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
He blazed the trail.
right. I was going to say, so he introduced Sikhi or Yogi Bhajan to you.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So so here you are. You're growing up with a gentleman who is very high in esteem. Harvard professor, mother who also works in Harvard. That I would think that that's a lot of pressure for their children to step up as a young girl, as a teenager growing up. Would you say?
I would definitely say that.
Wow.
And I think all 3 of us rebelled in our own way, but we all did. And my version of it was, my father can converse with any scholar, but he can't just have an ordinary conversation with a regular human being. He just didn't have that ability. He really, I guess to achieve what he achieved, you have to be completely one-pointed and focused. And that was, and it was interesting because my older brother took to that field much more than I did. I just wanted the dad who was going to play with me and be a regular guy. My older brother totally fell in love with the stories of Alexander the Great and all the Persian, kings and all that stuff. So he actually later on went into that field. But I was the complete, I didn't want to be like my father. It wasn't a positive example for me. It was like, oh my God, this is something of a very limited human being. Like he can't just be a regular guy, to me. That was like,
wow.
And he spoke a lot of this is my thing. He spoke a lot of languages. He was really remarkable in his achievements. If you knew one word of a language, he would just take from other languages and he'd put together and he'd come out with this, and people would look at him like he was crazy, but then they would answer him. He refused to speak English in any country he was in, always wanted to speak the native language. And that's how we learned. But he was so focused on that just to meet a regular person that only spoke English, he didn't know what to do. And I used to say, my father speaks so many languages, but he can't communicate in any of them. And that became my God. He's like, I want to be able to communicate with people. I don't care about all the accomplishments and all those, I just want to be like a real human being.
Would you say because he was a professor and he was obviously well, he sounds like he was very zoned in to what his career was, and obviously must have been very proud of his career. Absolutely. Would you say that he boxed himself in?
I don't know if I'd use that term or not. It was his, well, he just was so driven in that field, and he didn't care about anything else.
Gotcha.
He really didn't.
Right.
And yeah.
What a fascinating father, though. It certainly sounds like that.
What about the concept of the Renaissance? Someone who can, I think of someone who's a highly developed human being, they can sit down and talk to anybody and find something in common. Just the fact that we're 2 human beings sharing a space together. That was always my ideal. And I would just watch my father, and it was like it didn't matter. He just he couldn't do that, and he didn't value it. And so that became my passion, like to be as different from him as possible. It's really interesting with that kind of example growing up. And now I wish I'd been a little more understanding. I wish I had been able to look beyond those limitations, and because and I made peace with him towards the end of his life. But I hated him for years. I was so mad at him for years, and that's the youth, we're just so careless, aren't we? We're just so, and we don't understand who our parents are. We just see them through this, what we wish they were, or whatever that is. And, it's a tremendous sadness, but it takes us all this time to kind of accept, because I just thought that I was weird because my father was weird, and it was like, I just wanted to be, I guess I wanted to be like everybody else, and that was my own insecurity. So I had that from an early age, just very.
Yeah, it's amazing how someone said to me, well, my older lad, right, Ashwa, you've met him, right?
Of course,
Yes.
both your boys.
And he was having a problem with his mom, and I said to her, I think he must have been like 15 or 16. Let's just say 15 for argument's sake. And I said, Ashwa, you got to understand one thing. Your mother or me have never had a 15-year-old before. Never had a 16-year-old. You got to understand that this is a huge learning curve for parents every single day as well. So every day you grow up, right? Day to day, I've never experienced managing, being responsible proudly of having a kid your age. And then when it comes to your younger brother, I've never had a kid like that before, because he's very different to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very different. So always remember, as parents, it's a learning curve for us too. Not a lot of people talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, you've got a lad, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, however old he is, tomorrow he's going to be a little bit older. You have never personally ever experienced that. And kids don't know that until us parents remind them. But we forget that, hang on, I've never been in this position before, so it's always a wonderful reminder. Whenever I mess up as a father, I'll go, well, I've never been in this position before, so I get away with it.
Give me a pass. Come on.
So I mean, it's beautiful that I think as children, making amends with our siblings, with our parents, with our children, it's always a wonderful thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you said that to him. That's so real and honest. I was looking for a father that would say that kind of thing to me.
Yeah.
Just be real with me. But, some people have a hard time doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially back then.
Especially back then.
Back then.
Of course.
So here's little Guru Prasad Kaur running around as a teenager, going to school, going, I'm not going to be like my father. Right.
The anti-achiever.
The anti-achiever. How was it growing up in Boston as a teenager, as a 20-year-old, and how, what made your brother go down the road of yoga, faith, and religion? Were you guys born into a religious family? And what was that story like?
Oh, it's so fun. Memory lane. So I feel like I had a very idyllic childhood for the first 10, 11 years. We had a big house and dog and cat and rabbits, and every kind of pet that you could imagine. Neighborhood school down the street, neighborhood gang of kids to play with, woods to play out up back. It was a very, idyllic setting. And then I think when I hit puberty, I remember being about 12 and kind of realizing that my parents' marriage was completely phony. It was not, they just pretended. It was, and it's not that I hadn't realized it before, but it became front and central in my life. And so I feel like I went into this zone of just feeling completely alienated, the whole preteen angst. I mean, it's pretty common, right? And my I wish that my brothers and I could have gotten together and said, "Hey, what's up with the parents? Why are they so?" But I feel like we were taught there was this wall of silence. Like everybody knew that the marriage was completely, you know, terrible, and nobody could say anything because they kept up this facade. And I mean, I had horrible dreams as a kid. My parents would get divorced, and we'd have to choose who to live with. And I would have nightmares thinking, I really don't want to live with my father, but he needs someone to take care of him because he'll be devastated, because it was like my mother rejected him completely. And he was always seemed like the helpless, sad one, just, wanting her attention, and she just wouldn't give it to him. And so I kind of assumed that role. And he even, I guess you could call it, if you want to be in today's terms, you could call it emotional abuse, because he used to tell me as a little girl, your mother doesn't love me. And why would you tell a 7-year-old that? And I didn't understand that. And I'd go to mom and say, Dad says you don't love him. She's like, oh, it's different. She brushed me off. Why couldn't I mean, if I'm getting told by my father that the marriage is bad and my mother's, why couldn't my mother be real and say, he's right? If she had the courage to say that then, my whole anyway, what if it's futile to go down that road, but so it was like this whole thing, and I felt like it was my role. And I think all kids from bad marriages broken because they eventually did divorce. They did. And that was my worst nightmare. It was like I hated that we lived together with this lie, but I was terrified of them getting divorced because then I'd have to choose. And I knew it would kill my father, that he needed me to take care of him, and I was only very young, and but I wanted to live with my mother, so that was my nightmare. And somehow I feel like Iran. It's really interesting because my father had this position that he was given. I don't remember what year, but he was made the director of something called the Asia Institute in Shiraz, Iran. Beautiful city in Iran, just amazing. And so he would spend, and I think it was part of it was his way of getting out of the house for 6 months of the year. Because he started traveling more and more and more and more. He was home less and less and less, and this position enabled him to go over there and work. And then he'd on the vacations at Harvard, and then he'd come back, and that was kind of how they held it together those final years. And I remember saying to somebody, it was either my mother or father, why don't we just go to Iran? Like, why, let's at least just get out of this mess. This is not. And everybody seemed to think that was a good idea. So I always feel like I'm the one who suggested it, because we didn't have to go to Iran. My father, he lived in both places, but that may be my own perception, because I don't think anyone else in the family saw it that way, but that's my perception. Like somehow, if we get out of this situation in this suburb where everybody lives behind their walls and nobody's real with each other, and it's all, God knows how many families on that block were miserable, but you'd never know because people didn't get divorced back then so often, at least in that neighborhood. And so, it's just like I just had to get the hell out of there.
Right.
That's how I felt. Just get me out of this situation. And I want to tell you, it was like being plucked out of hell and put into heaven, going to Iran.
So for all the viewers out there who know about Iran and Iraq today, as the devastation of it, um, you know, I guess my first question is, what years were you in Iran? And secondly, what was the lifestyle
Mm.
during that time?
It was, so it's like we only see the world as this, I had no idea that the Shah's regime was that repressive, and that, we had installed him as a puppet and all that stuff. All I knew was Iran was modernizing, and they opened their doors to foreigners. They wanted foreigners there, so there were all kinds of fences. So it was 1969.
So how many years were you there for?
4 years, 2 different times. So that first visit, I was there for 2 years. And the thing that was so wonderful about it was teeming with life. The suburbs are, to me, these very cold, sterile environments. Everybody's, inside with their air conditioning.
Yeah.
Nobody's on the street, and there's no, and all of a sudden I get dumped down into this like teeming. And when we first moved there, we lived on the old side of town, which was always my favorite place to live because it was just, the donkeys and
Bustling.
bustling the marketplace and it was like balm for a troubled teenage soul that was just longing for real life and not this, sterile thing that I'd run away from.
How old were you when you were there?
So I was 13.
Okay.
When I was 13, I just, hit the teenage years.
Wow.
And I also felt like I got my childhood back because, kids mature at different rates. And I was not one of these kids that wanted to grow up. Because growing up meant realizing the pain, realizing all the shit, and being a child was the innocent time. That was when I had no idea that things were so bad. And so I really kind of longed for that. And Iran gave me this window of time where I could just be, I didn't feel any peer pressure or any of that, or those things that, kids have to go through here. It was just somehow, and it was such an interesting community because it's not that we lived as regular Iranians did, but it was the Shah's time. And we lived in a university town. So Shiraz had a university, Pahlavi University, named after the dynasty of the Shah Pahlavi. But the medium was English. Not that all the students spoke English well enough to, so there were professors that, would teach in Persian as well. But the goal was to get everybody to learn in English.
Wow.
So they invited all these professors from all UPenn had a contract there. And so obviously, my father went to represent Harvard but he also, same in India. There are only two prestigious careers to study in a developing country, and that's either medicine or engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to bring back history. It's like, you guys have the most phenomenal history on the planet, and you don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And so that was his mission, was to educate Iranians about themselves and to use Iran is the classroom, so he was on archaeological digs and Shiraz is where Persepolis is and all these incredible, historical sites. And so we kind of, hung out there, knew all these weird professors that, from all over the place that made that their life's work. And so it was a rarefied community. But, there were many Iranians also, Iranian professors. The school I went to, Shiraz International Community School, SICS, and my classmates were Iranian and German and English and American and various other, the whole school was a mixture of, this kind of community where everybody was there because of the university. Because I don't think, I guess we had a few Lockheed kids. Yeah, no, actually we did. But a lot of them had they started their own school and stuff. So they stopped coming to that school. But when I was first there was a whole mixture of kids and it was fabulous.
So the school system is like the Gurdwara system in these countries where if I don't get on with your school, I'm just going to create my own. Like that.
Something right? Like that, right?
Committee versus subcommittee. And that's just, well, if this is the way the Guru Granth Sahib should be, therefore I'm going to make my own Gurdwara from across the road from you, all right? Sounds a bit like that.
It's kind of universal.
So here you are. So you come back to the US, and your father comes back, or first of all, did your mother go with you?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was my mother. So my older brother had gone on archaeological digs with my father since the time he was about 15, and he was actually in Iran. No. Yes. Well, he was in Iran that summer. We didn't get there till the fall. And so, but when he found out that the family was going to move over, he stayed and he went to school in Tehran, and we were moving to Shiraz. But so he went to a boarding school in Tehran.
Right.
And what was your question again?
My question was, so you were there for a handful of years and your mother went with you.
And so I was traveling with my mother and my younger brother. Mm-hmm. And then my dad was still at Harvard when we went over there, and then he came later.
Wow.
And he was with us. And we didn't have a place to live. So, so the Asia Institute was housed in this old Qajar palace. The Qajars were the previous dynasty. And it was this gorgeous place that was called the Naranjistan, which means orange garden, orange trees everywhere. It was beautiful. And we lived in the servants' quarters. And
Wow.
his office was out at the front. And I want to tell you, that was the best time I had, because we were with all these people who didn't speak English, so that's probably when I learned the most Persian. I was so anxious to learn how to speak it, and just, so we kind of picked up these words, and we'd, have these conversations with people, and just, I don't know, I love that kind of thing. I mean, I just fell in love with being able to really absorb another culture. Like, living in a place is so different than visiting it. Like, living
Yes.
there and becoming, so I got so, I felt like I got my freedom too, because, in the suburbs, as a kid, you're stuck. Your mom has to take you everywhere, and the train to Boston was, you had to get to the train station, all this stuff. You could step out of the door and shout your destination to one of these collective taxis, and they'd stop and pick you up. So I got to go all over the city as a 13-year-old, had so much independence. I mean, I just loved every aspect about being there.
I think it's amazing that you shared that story, because there's this thought process in Western Hemisphere, Great Britain, America, that places like Iran the women have been persecuted, and women have to wear full hijabs. And I'm sure back then there must have been a handful of women who did, and that's absolutely fine. But this story that you say of the safety of you just jumping into a taxi, going to the other side of the town, and just doing your thing. I know this, from what I've learned, the history of Iran. But there's not a lot of people in the Western world who will listen to this and go, "No way."
Yeah.
I know Iraq as Saddam Hussein. I know Iran as that dynasty, and
nobody even knew
impressed.
where Iran was back then.
No.
Not that everybody does now, but
Yeah.
back then it was like the weirdest thing, to even consider that someone would go there and stuff. But because the Shah was modernizing, women and Persian women, I want to tell you, they're the most fashion, and they still wear under their chador. They're called chadors, that they still, do all the stuff that they did before. I mean, these, the rich Iranians, they go to Paris. And French was the lingua franca. And to be an educated person in Iran, you spoke French, not English,
Right.
Back then and stuff. But so you saw all kinds of Western dress. And because it was just this imposition of these Western values on this traditional culture, the men couldn't handle it. And so I was poked and pinched and catcalled and all that kind of stuff. And I learned to fight back, but I also learned I would get so mad at Americans for being so outraged that someone pinched them or something. I'm like, you're wearing a mini skirt. You're just, you're wearing, like, have a little respect for the culture. So I learned, don't go out, don't, be flashy in your dress, try to be modest.
I mean, and this is a great thing about living in other parts of the world, is that you learn so many different ways of doing it. So here you are, living your life, 13 years old, killing it in Iran.
Having
And
so
then
much fun.
one day you go, you're moving to back to the greatest country in the world. How was that for
I
you?
never wanted to come back. Never. I'm like, I was so happy there. And so the circumstances were, because this was a relatively small school, and there were all these people that would come and get dissatisfied and not like it and this and that and pull their kids out of school. And so it was very, unstable, the situation. So I was there for the 8th and 9th grade, right? Yeah, 8th and 9th grade. And we were going to go home. It was 1971. We were going home for the summer. And I was sure I was coming back. I was like, I didn't want to stay in America. Why would I want to stay in America? Iran was my home. I loved it, had every intention of coming back. So me and my older brother, Sub Parker, we travel overland. I mean, this is like the most phenomenal experience. We get on a train in Tehran and we go to Istanbul. And then from Tehran to Istanbul, there's no food at all. There's no, you know,
How long does that take on the train?
I can't remember. I mean, I feel like we had a couple nights on the train. I'll never forget. There was no dining car. We didn't bring any food, and we shared a compartment with a Turk who was so, or was maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe we took a bus from Tehran to Istanbul. Maybe the Turk makes sense that he would get on in Istanbul. He was going to Munich. So I know we went from Istanbul to Munich on the train. Could it have been that long? Because that was days
And you didn't
with
eat?
no food. And this Turk, he had a suitcase full of food, and he pulled out his food, and he kept offering it to us. And my brother said, "Oh, no, it's okay." I'm like, I think he learned to be very Persian, my brother. It's called taruf. Someone offers you something, you have to refuse it.
Right.
And I think that the thing is, you refuse it a couple times, and then like by the third time, you can say okay. But the guy didn't know the game, so he just ate his food. It's like, you don't want to eat. Okay, I'm going to eat it myself.
Wow.
And I'm 15 years old and I'm starving. And my brother's like this. I felt like he was like this, the prison guard or something, not letting me eat. We finally stopped at a train station. Where was it? And we weren't there very long. And he ran out. And, the only thing he could get was a loaf of bread and some anchovies. And I ate that like it was like the golden meal of, it was. Anyway, I think after that, I feel like that didn't go all the way, that somehow maybe the next train had a dining car or something. But anyway, I'm getting lost in the weeds here. Sorry about that. So yeah, I travel home, Munich. We go to Munich, Amsterdam, fly from Amsterdam to Boston. I spend a wonderful summer home because I'm so happy in my life that I'm going back to Iran. I reconnect with a lot of old friends and I share all these stories, and it's wonderful. And the end of the summer, I find out I'm not going back to Iran. I'm going to boarding school in England. My father never asked me. He just told me, you're going to school in England because you're not getting a good education. There's not adequate, there's not going to be a proper 10th grade when you go back to Iran. I was really pissed. That was probably
Wow.
one of the reasons I hated my father for years. And the thing of it is, when you finally realize everything happens for a reason, and he was doing the best he could by what he considered important, and communication. Remember, he could speak many languages but couldn't communicate in any of them.
Right.
If he'd just been able to come to me and say, "Hey, you're going to really like this. This is going to be a new adventure. You're going to make friends. You're going to be," nothing. It was just like, this is where you're going. And so Rebel came out. I basically did, actually, and I look back on those years with incredible fondness. At the time, I was so pissed and I became this bad girl and but I had some amazing experiences there. And I learned what life in a boarding school is. So a little part of me understands what our kids went through. It's very different to go to a boarding school than to just go to a day school. I mean, it's a whole other beast. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, the hierarchy is something that I've never been to a boarding school. So the hierarchy within a boarding school, their morning, noon, and night, never seeing your parents. Even back then, there was no telephones. So it's not like you could FaceTime them. You had none of that. So where in England did you go?
Sussex. St. Leonard on Sea. St. Leonard's, I guess, with a plural. Yeah, Sussex.
How was that for you?
Well, if you'd asked me then, I would have just, and now I'm like, it was amazing. I made a lot of friends. I had incredible experiences, but because I was pissed and I didn't want it, and it was so weird. I'm sorry, the way the English teach and the way they prep, an hour of prep, and we would like copy from our, textbooks. That was the prep. You'd sit there and you had to, uniform all the time, all that stuff.
Did you like the uniform?
I mean, later on, when I became a teacher myself, I thought, God, uniform is the best way to go.
Uniform's the best.
It's the best.
So you were there till 18?
No. No, I was actually only there 1 year.
Okay.
I was actually only there 1 year. I got into enough trouble that my mother got many notes from the headmistress saying that I'm just completely uncooperative and refused to obey even the simplest rules and regulations. So it's not that I got kicked out, but my mother was afraid I would be, and she kind of like preempted it and said,
Right.
I don't think you should go back there.
You should quit before you got fired.
You should quit before you
situation.
get fired. Exactly. There
Yeah.
you go. That's it.
So then you're back in Boston. I want to get to this. You've gone through. You're going through your rebel phase. You sound, and please tell me if I'm wrong. Frustration, resentment. You are going down that road of free.
Yeah.
And
I come back and have the worst culture shock. That's why I really feel for our kids, how hard that is to reintegrate into, it's like I just came back and I felt so alienated from everybody, and like nobody would understand my experience. Nobody could possibly understand what I've just been through. And so how am I gonna fit in? And then I'm at the height of that, 16. The first, so we have these terms, and then you have this month, like
yes,
you know that, right? You know
England,
that well.
yes.
So the first one, I got to go to Iran because my parents were still there, and that was fabulous. Had a wonderful time. My mother got hepatitis and she almost died, so the family had to move back to America. So then the second time I had to go to, I'm sorry to call it America, that's so chauvinistic, the United States.
No, America's fine. America, listen,
or North America.
whoever's watching this, they've called America far worse than just America.
No,
so
I know, but I was just talking to some South Americans and like, what gives you guys the right to call yourself Americans? Like, please, you're North Americans, but
fair enough. I didn't think of it from that point of view.
Yeah.
So you're back in America. Your mother survives.
My mother, she made medical history though. They
Okay.
had given her like a 10% chance to pull out of this coma. She had terrible case of hepatitis, completely yellow. I mean, it was really scary. And so she had to leave, but she did pull out of it, and she came back home. And that's when the marriage fell apart completely. It was like,
Right.
why even pretend anymore at this point? So those were really rough years. And honest to God, they're still a source of pain, and I've come to terms with it, but I was very unhappy those years in high school.
Is it fair to? The experience. You're now 16 years old. You've lived in Boston. You lived in Great Britain, England. You've spent time. You've lived in Iran. This is in the 1960s, 70s. What an opportunity! Because there's people who live it. People even in this. Today, you can go to a town in Arkansas and
they've never left.
They've never left. And here you are,
I know. And I totally get that. And it's, again, it kind of tapped into that old feeling that I had of just like wanting to be like everybody else. Like, why am I so different? Why is my dad so different that he can't have a conversation with an ordinary person? But now I've become like him. I'm this rarefied person who's had this hard to, now people go abroad so commonly and live abroad. It's a very common thing. But when I did it back then, it seemed to be very uncommon. I'm always attracted to people who've had that experience. I'm like, oh my God, you understand. And I think our kids, I really think there's so much that if you haven't had that experience, you can't understand what they went through.
I always say to my boys, so, my older lad, when he was 16, he went to Spain. He went to Cadiz. He spent the whole summer in Cadiz. And when he was 15 years old, and he had to wait until his 16th birthday to travel by himself from Spain to Atlanta, Georgia to San Diego. He did that on his 16th birthday. And even that is a rarity that only happened a handful of years ago.
Yeah.
So, what you went through in the 1970s, that is, catching a plane.
Great that you gave him that opportunity.
Yeah, my younger lad, he went to because he's a soccer player, goalkeeper. He went to Buenos Aires by himself.
Amazing.
As well when he was 15, 16. Just shipped him off over there.
It's the best thing you can do
Yeah,
for a kid.
absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
So I want to get to
Sorry.
Sikhi and I want to get to
Okay,
Yogi
sorry,
Bhajan.
I
How
know,
did this
really.
work?
In what work?
How did your brother how did your brother fall into yoga, specifically Kundalini yoga, and how did you follow in those footsteps?
So my brother was always my idol. I just adored him. He was 4 years older than me, and he was always on the cutting edge of everything, including drugs and, the whole hippie scene and stuff like that. So when he graduated from high school in Tehran, he didn't want to go to college or anything. He wanted to go to India. That's all he wanted to do was go to India. And to my father's credit, he let him go. And so he went off to India when he was 18, did the whole hippie thing, traveled through Afghanistan, Pakistan, made his way to Delhi, and then found a Buddhist monastery and spent time there and took Buddhist vows. And of course, that was the Vietnam War era. So he became a conscientious objector, due to his religion and stuff. He had all these incredible experiences. My brother came home. So that was his, his gap. Now it has a name. Back then it was just like, I'm not going to school now, okay? But now that was his gap year. And he walks back into our garden in Shiraz. So I'm 15 at this point, and his hair is all long, and he's got this thing, and he comes with a couple of friends, and I'm like, oh my God, Jesus Christ has returned home. That was my whole thing. I was like, so it's like from that moment on, because the Jesus Christ thing is because we fell in. My mother and I fell in with a group of born again Christians, and at 50, I mean, I've always feel like I've just always wanted God. I've just from the time I was a little girl, just you know longed for that. And I did. You do ask me, I grew up in the Episcopal church and I sang in the choir and my mother taught Sunday school. And, I had that kind of, but it was always a Sunday thing. And when I went to Iran, like like my whole world changed in so many ways, but I met people for whom faith was a daily thing.
Yes.
These Christians, they prayed all the time and they always talked about Jesus and for me, that was like, oh my God, this is the real deal. This isn't the Sunday thing I'm putting on my Sunday clothes and I'm going for an hour and then I, forget about it for the rest of the week. These people have a living faith. And I was so attracted to that. And of course, when they saw how attracted I was to it, they started praying for me. So then they got me.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I have a couple of friends who live in Iran right now. And every time I'm in contact with them via WhatsApp, they go, God is great. May God bless you. God's grace upon you, my brother. Everything. Every time they say
Inshallah.
goodbye, every time they say hello, it's always God. God may bless you.
Khodafez means God bless you. That's how you say goodbye.
Right.
Salam alaikum is, of course, peace be upon you. Yeah. Inshallah is every other, you never say anything without saying inshallah, God willing, only if God wills it. I won't do it. So that's, there's that. And there's also the call to prayer that 5 times a day is blaring out of the local mosques, and that sound is so hypnotizing. And it's just like, that was my first experience with the sound current and it was powerful. So there was that, but then there are these Christians too, and so we kind of fell in with them. And I didn't care, it was kind of like if I'd met a Muslim who had said, come pray with me 5 times, I would have become a Muslim for sure. But, it was the Christians who were praying for me and then they invited me to their prayer circles. And so I had this really like conversion experience. And so Jesus was my, ideal. And then my brother looks just like Jesus. I'm like, oh my God.
He was living with me all the time.
And he was so cool because he'd had all these incredible experiences and his friends were amazing. And it was just for this 15-year-old kid just looking, going, oh, I want to be just like them.
Yeah. So then you've gone into Christianity, brothers come back.
I forgot the part though, before he went to India, because I'd had this whole Christian thing before he went to India. And one of my mother's friends said to her, we'll pray for your son, but he's going to hell. That was all of a sudden this break. It was like, oh, it's not okay what he's doing. he's not, he's not doing the Christian thing. He's
Right.
going off to find something else. He's lost, he's damned for all eternity or whatever they think, that was when the cracks started appearing I was like, I don't like that. How can I worship a God that says that these people aren't okay, that only these people are getting saved?
Right.
They always use that term,
Yes.
saved. And if you're not saved, that never made sense to me. So that actually,
I always say how convenient you were born in the right religion.
Yeah, I know.
It's how convenient.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Isn't God wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah. And all those other people, he doesn't. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
So you're still in Iran at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you when your brother's back, are you still part of the Christian faith at this point?
That's a good, I can't say for sure. There were definitely, I was so disillusioned with that statement. Like, I'll pray for your son, he's going to hell. That was a horrifying statement to me. So I was already starting to crack.
Right.
But I also, and then all of a sudden I wanted what my brother had. I'm like, okay, forget these people. I want to be like this, because he just had this aura about him,
Yeah.
But he was still, floundering and seeking this and doing, and he was still smoking a lot of pot and stuff, and
Hippie days.
Hash.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so he's back. I'm guessing you guys come back to America at this point.
Yeah. So I kind of reversed the order. Yeah. And then we took that fabulous trip home together across, the continent, and flew back. And then the whole England thing, and then my mom getting sick, and then being back in America. And I think what did my brother do at that point? Did he stay in Iran? And when he went, because he definitely went to school there he did go to university there for a year. So he wasn't it was just my mother, my younger brother, and me. And that was very lonely. My dad went off and married somebody else. And, there was a lot of abandonment issues and stuff at that time. That was the difficult time. That I don't want to go too much into that. But when my brother finally came back to the States, he actually decided that he was gonna. Oh, I guess he went to UMass first. Yeah, he went. So he went and he got his undergraduate degree. But it was after that he decided he wanted to go into my father's field. So he actually got into Harvard and was in my father's department. My father couldn't have been happier. Finally, one of his kids is successful and following in his footsteps. So it was a big, huge thing. And they were very close at that time, and it was a thing. And then he took his first Kundalini Yoga class. I think he actually took it at UMass because he did. But it was already starting to work in him. So long story short, he dropped out of Harvard. He went to live in an ashram in Dorchester, Massachusetts, which was way deep in the inner city, and worked full time at the Golden Temple restaurant.
So hang on, let me get this. Let me get this right. So your older brother, he gets into Harvard. His father is working in Harvard. He's got his career on the straight and narrow. He's getting through it, and he's introduced to Kundalini Yoga, and he goes, "Yeah, nah, I quit Harvard. I'll see ya." And he pops over and he goes to the ashram and he dedicates his life to Kundalini Yoga, the ashram, and starts working at the Golden Temple in Boston.
Yes.
Wow.
And my father's colleagues say to him, "Dick, you'll have to face it. Your son has lost his mind."
No doubt they thought that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And meanwhile, me going through whatever I was going through at that time, I guess I was in school at that point. I thought it was weird as hell. I mean, I always looked up to my brother, and because he did the coolest thing, but he was still my drinking buddy. I mean, he's the first person who got me stoned when I was 13. He pulls out a piece of hash and he goes, "You know what this is?" And I'm like, it gets me, so we have this history together, and all of a sudden, straight and narrow, he's changed his name. He's doing this stuff that was just like, that was too extreme for me. I'm like, whoa, oh my God.
So foreign.
And back in those days, like, he got engaged to this woman that lived in the ashram too, Navjeevan Kaur. they couldn't be together unless they had a chaperone with them. That's how it was back in the early days. That was just too weird for me. I was just like, "What?"
Wow.
And, the Bana back then was really intense. You know, the chimney stacks and you're like, and the the name, the whole thing. I mean, it was just, yeah, it was too foreign. That was a little, yeah.
You thought your brother pushed the boat out too far.
I thought so. Yep.
So I mean, he's still in Massachusetts. He's still in Boston. So
Yeah.
you're not far from him at all. So you still see him.
Yeah, but it's just so different
Yeah.
now. It's like, who are you? What have you done with my brother?
Yeah.
I definitely remember because you got to remember I came off those years of he was away for so long, and then he came back and he was like this, and then all of a sudden he's gone again.
Yeah.
But he's gone in a totally different way.
Mm.
And now I'm like really feeling alienated and alone.
Alone.
And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then your pride and joy, only a year or two ago you thought Jesus Christ was resurrected. And he's back in the family, he's working with dad, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's gone again.
He's gone again.
And he's gone to this situation that is so foreign.
And those lives, I mean, the early ashram life, you know what it was like. He would get up at 2:30 every morning and to do his sadhana, and then he'd bike to work. He lived in Dorchester, and the restaurant was, I forget where it was, but anyway, it was in Cambridge. Anyway, it was a long bike ride. And he was exhausted all the time. And he would come home once in a while on the weekend and immediately fall asleep. And I remember one time my father was visiting too. My parents were long divorced at that point, but for some reason my father, I guess it was because he was home, and so we were all gathering and stuff like. So we're gonna sleep. My mom was like, "What's so great about this new religion? All he does is sleep." We're all just going, "What?" It was strange.
Wow.
For all of us, except my mother did yoga in the 50s. I mean, she got turned on to various things and health food and stuff like that. So my mother was very interested in it. She was much more sympathetic than anyone else in the family.
Right.
She was very attracted to it,
Okay. And so what's the story for you checking it out, seeing this weird thing that's going on with this stuff on their heads? And because all of this is, well, actually no, because you're in Iran, I'm sure you knew the turban thing, right?
Sure, yeah. So it's not that it was so foreign per se. It was just my own brother. It just represented separation. It
Right.
just represented him doing something so different and I was left out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you decided, no, I don't want to be left out. I want to check this out.
No.
No? Okay.
It took me a long time. And then that's a long story. My mother lived with her father until he died. And then it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do with mom? Because mom was always needed a lot of help. She was not quite, I don't know, right now she'd probably be diagnosed with some kind of mental, she just was not really, she couldn't really take care of herself very well. And so what are we going to do with mom? Sapurka came up with the idea of moving her into the ashram.
Wow.
Because she was so open to it. And he said, Mom, you gotta go live in the ashram. They'd love to have you, And she did. She lived there for 14 years.
Wow.
She first lived in Dorchester when they moved from these old houses in the city, deep in the city, out to Millis. She did the move with them, and she lived in Millis all those years. I guess so she must have been longer than 4, because she was 14 years in Millis and a couple of years in Dorchester, I think.
So basically, the Sangat looked after her.
They did. And she cleaned. My mother is a triple Virgo. She just cleaned. She became like the house mother.
Wow.
Scrubbed the toilets. I mean, she had this whole Gandhi complex. Like, I remember she would sleep on the floor, way back when, and she was kind of this ascetic personality. I remember a friend coming over and seeing her room and going, your mother sleeps on the floor and there's a book about Gandhi right next to her or something. It's like she was just like,
wow, she was on it.
She was totally. And so she scrubbed toilets because that was That was what she did. Yeah. But she had some really beautiful years there, and she went to sadhana every morning. She really loved the practice. And but it was funny, she would always say, I don't feel like I'm a Sikh. I love this lifestyle. I love the teachings. I love the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib. She used to read from the Akampat. They'd have occasional Akampats, not regular ones, but she'd be the one that would get stuck in the middle of the night reading hour after hours, and she loved it. She absolutely loved it. I mean, she acted like a Sikh. She walked, talked, dressed like a Sikh, but she always said, she had this whole Christian thing. She just couldn't resolve. Like somehow she couldn't leave the faith of her.
No, I think that your mother is a wonderful representation of faith and religion. This is a committed Christian who is doing her banis now. A lot of people think Jap Sahib or Japji Sahib is for Sikhs only, and it's not.
It's so universal.
Japji Sahib, Jap Sahib, Kirtans, all of them. They're for every human being. And when you recite these with Jesus Christ in your mindset, that makes you a wonderful Christian.
Exactly. Be the best.
This is the first time I've heard of an individual who considers themselves Christian doing Japji Sahib, doing Jap Sahib, doing sadhana, doing Guru Granth Sahib, Akampat, all of those things. That is a beautiful story right there. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's beautiful. I think it's fantastic. Right?
I mean, Yogi Ji used to say there's Christian Sikhs, there's Hindu Sikhs, there's 100%. Muslim Sikhs, just be the best, and that's, and the Sikh is just a seeker anyway. So, yeah. And my mother, I mean, I came from a family of seekers. That's, even my father in his own way declared atheist, but he knew about every religion.
Yeah.
And if you're an atheist, why would you care? Why would you bother to study all the world's religions and know everything about them? And especially in his later years, he would visit me, when we really made peace. He would come and visit me and stay at my house, and we'd have, I'd take him to all the events, and I'd have, hold events in my home where we'd chant to Guru Ram Dass or whatever. And my father would always just kind of go, music, the language of the soul. So he had that as well, even though he denied it. I guess you were supposed to be an atheist back then if you were in the academic world, but
well, I mean,
can't fool me.
It's always that story that I always remind my boys whenever they need reminding. I'm one of those fathers who just lecture as well, but I always say, that you have two twins in the womb, and one twin says, oh, what's after this life? I'm looking forward to the light and seeing God and, mother and everyone. You got the other twin who goes, there's nothing after this. This is just crap. This is nothing. Look at us. We're stuck here, blah, blah, blah. And and they're in the same situation. And regardless of what the child, where the glass is half empty, like, this is crap, there's nothing after this, mother still fed, mother still protected, mother still kept safe, regardless of what you felt, what you thought, and so when it comes to atheists, if you believe in yourself, and we are God.
Exactly.
Remember, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven is within us. So if you believe in yourself and you believe in the Almighty, automatically, mother. That's it. So that's where your father felt that naam, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, isn't it wonderful to finally grow up and get to look at your life through the lens of, that's what was going on.
That's why my parents said no. I shouldn't do that.
Right? I mean, it's all so perfect when you thought everything was so broken and so messed up. And
yeah, it's true. So now your mom is living in this weird place of this ashram. Your brother's committed to this ashram, quit Harvard, and here you are. You must be going to visit mom. You must be going to visit your brother. You're seeing these women with like, they look like
and
Cleopatra.
What I remember about going to the ashram back in those days was the smell of yogi tea. I remember walking in and going, oh my God, they all smell like, like the one in Dorchester, the Millis. I mean, it was just like, it was permeated every, That was very attractive to me,
Right.
you know. So there's all these little things that are starting to like permeate my consciousness and everything. And I go visit my mom and I'd get up and go to sadhana with her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and I started going to Guru Charan Singh's class in Harvard Square, you know, and started doing these things. Never, ever in a million years, though, thinking that I'd do the whole thing. It was just like, okay, you know, my family's doing this and I'm enjoying this. I like it. I wasn't one of those, you know, people like my first Kundalini class and that was it. That didn't happen to me. It was like, this is fine, but, you know, this is not going to be.
Whatever.
You know, they're doing it. I'm not going to do what they're doing. I have to do my own thing. I'm
Right.
not going to, you know, follow in their footsteps.
And then what happened?
And then what happened?
I mean, I'm trying to push you down this road
I know.
of how did you
I
get
know.
there?
And I'm sorry. I feel like I'm just like meandering all over the place. So there comes a point in your life where you know, I mean, I always wanted God in my life, always from that, you know, early days when I sang in the choir to becoming a born again Christian to hearing the call of prayer and just like longing, you know. I went back to Iran after I graduated from high school and spent a couple of years there. And I traveled and I taught English and then I went to school for a year. But the thing, I mean, these images that stay with me are being on a bus in Afghanistan and the bus would stop exactly at the time of prayer. And we'd be driving, you know, be in this remote place with these mountains and the men, because it was always the men, you know, usually you didn't see women traveling. So it'd be the foreign women. But all the Afghan men would get out and they'd face Mecca and they'd do this. And I'd think, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Like it just touched me so deeply. So, you know, always wanting something, but you know, it's tough to be like the third in line. It's like, if I'm going to do what they do, it's not going to be original. I have to be original, you know? So I joined a volunteer program that was run by the Catholic Church. And I went down to Brownsville, Texas, and I spent a year down there teaching school, going to mass, thinking I was going to become a Catholic. And it wasn't working. You know, there were things I liked about it because Catholic masses are very much like Episcopal services. The hymns were all familiar. You know, I became friends with the priest. I mean, he was just a wonderful guy. And he was trying to counsel me and give me all kinds of, and there was just this deep longing, like, this doesn't feel like what I want. I want something more. And because I had done sadhana and I knew what it was, I started getting up and doing my own version of sadhana. I even think, I don't know, it was my brother or my mother, but somebody sent me a bunch of tapes, you know, back then the cassette tapes with the sadhana meditations and yoga manuals and all this stuff so that I could do it myself. And I spent the second half of that year doing sadhana. By the end of that school year, then I had to decide, am I going to, you know, what am I going to do for the summer? And am I going to come back and be in this program another year? And all I could think of is, now I want to go to solstice. Because I knew about solstice. My brother had been to solstice. My mother had been to solstice. And I was like, I just had this long, I was like, I need more of this. I need more of this in my life. This is what's giving me what I've been searching for, what I've been longing for.
How old were
I was
you
a kid
at this point?
So at this point, you know, I'd gone to graduate school and done some traveling and stuff. So I'm like 28.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I go to solstice, fall in love, as everybody does. Ram Dass Puri, sadhana at solstice, you know, is unparalleled. You're like, okay, this is it. I got to do this. So then I meet this, I stay for ladies camp, not the whole thing, just maybe a week or something, but I meet this, because meanwhile I had, you know, because I lived in Brownsville, Texas, which is right on the border of Mexico, and I really wanted to learn Spanish. I had gone down to Mexico for a program that summer. Was it after solstice? When was it? I can't remember. Anyway, I had that experience of being in Mexico, studying Spanish and wanting more. So then when I go to solstice and ladies camp, I meet this woman, Satnam Kaur. She was English, La Inglesa, they called her La Inglesa. But she'd been in Mexico years. She'd been married to a Jesuit. I mean, he wasn't a priest, but he was, you know, he was very religious. And he went off and had an affair. She said, every Mexican, it's universal. You cannot meet a Mexican man that doesn't have at least one or two mistresses on the side. And anyway, she ended up divorcing him, but she spoke beautiful Spanish with an English accent. But she was a very interesting lady. She had this really interesting house in downtown Mexico. I met her at ladies' camp, and I just shared with her how much I had enjoyed being in Mexico. She said, "Come and visit me. You have an open invitation. Come to visit me." Most people say that expecting, not expecting.
Yes.
So I show up on her doorstep. I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to Mexico to live in her ashram so that I can do sadhana and work on my Spanish. That's all I wanted to do. So I lived with her. She was kind of a very interesting guide and teacher. But my relationship with her ended because the great earthquake of 1985 in Mexico City, I don't know if you remember, it was 8.2.
Wow. No, I was 5 years old.
You were 5 years old, yeah. Wow. That puts it all in perspective.
I was 5.
That's hilarious. It was a devastating earthquake,
Right.
and her house was damaged, and I think she had to move out and get repaired. Anyway, I got sent to the other ashram. Mind you, I'm just a yoga student. I'm not a Sikh. I don't, I'm still exploring and, trying to do my own thing and stuff like that. I get sent to Babaji's ashram. You must know Babaji.
Yes.
He's legendary.
Yes.
Babaji. Now, he truly was my first teacher. I really loved Babaji. And I hated him when I first met him because he reminded me of those tyrants, those petty tyrants that I thought they had all disappeared out of the ashram. I thought they'd all left en masse. The ones that gave orders and told people. And there was this, because it was Mexico, it was this distinct hierarchy, it was like upstairs, downstairs.
Right. Yeah.
All the rich people lived upstairs. And I was in the servants' quarters sharing a room the size of a closet with another person. It was wild. But he started noticing because I was very faithful I went to sadhana. I did everything. And one day he summons me upstairs. I'm like, I'm being called upstairs by the great Babaji, He was, this guy was a master. He knew exactly what to say. He read people. He knew exactly where somebody was in their consciousness and what was needed. And he pulled that whole thing. He said, "You've never made a commitment to anything in your life. You need this so badly. I can see that. You need to put a turban on. You need to do the whole thing. None of this messing around, none of this, I'm doing a little bit of that, have it my way. I can make my own rules. You're going to do it this way." And he was so compelling. And Babaji had the magnetism and the charisma and the consciousness all together. He was truly a great teacher. And I feel like I owe so much to him. Fighting cancer, I don't know how many times. He was in remission when I met him, but he walked with a limp, and he was just an amazing human being. He was so when I lived in that. So I did. I put on a turban. I was like, okay, I'm doing it. I was teaching at this little school in Mexico, just teaching English. I go to school in my turban, they fire me right away.
No.
Yeah, they're like, you can't do this. And she gives me this whole thing, in Mexico, because of the revolution, nobody, a priest can't wear his collar, on the street, there's it's a completely secular society and you can't show any religious preference. And so you're out.
Wow.
But that door closed and another door opened and I got a better job, the usual kind of thing. So that was my first.
So then you just it just took one conversation and you were in.
Yeah, well, it's not that I didn't go through many.
Of course. No,
things,
you.
But that, that really was powerful. And then I got engaged to a guy who dumped me, and there are all kinds of, details. But that was it until I got to LA.
When we get back to LA, I want to ask you, when did you first meet Yogi Bhajan? And what was it like?
Okay, thanks. That's a great question. So I first met him. I didn't personally meet him, but I saw him for the first time. And I was prepared to hate him because this was the man that took my brother. And everybody worshipped him. And he was like, and I'm like, oh, come on. And I remember seeing that Tradicum picture and going, oh, no. My younger brother was like, he was like, oh my God, it's contagious. Is it going to happen to me too? And don't look into the eyes of that teacher because for sure he'll get you too. It was like this huge joke. And So I was prepared to not like Yogi Bhajan.
So this is during Boston.
This is my first solstice.
Oh.
After I've been in Texas and I'm doing sadhana. So I'm very open, but at the same time, I'm very guarded. Yeah. And I hate that guy. Oh, God. And so we're sitting in the tantric shelter and Yogi Bhajan is coming. He's going to give a lecture and he's supposed to come at whatever time it is. And we're sitting there and we're chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting. And I'm like, he's supposed to be here at 5 or something. I said, it's 6 o'clock. It's 7:30. It's like, I'm like, and then here I'm thinking to myself, who the hell does this guy think he is? I paid good money. And, I want my money's worth. And he's just coming in, strolling in whenever, whatever. I had no comprehension at all about anything. And I was completely ready to just hate him even more because I just thought he thought he was God and he could do whatever he wanted. And the rest of us were just going to be whatever, subject to whatever his will. I had this whole story in my mind. And literally within the first, I don't know, he disarmed me so quickly. I'm sitting there kind of going, yeah, show me what you can do. And he said, the first thing I remember him saying is, it's not me, it's the teachings. Don't love me. It's not about me. It's about these teachings. These teachings will change your life. And you know how that first message you hear, you're like, oh, he's not at all the way I thought he was. This is just something so pure, so completely without ego, so completely generous and giving to us, who'd been sitting there waiting for him to, it just completely disarmed me. And, he had me, that thing, you had me at, that's the famous line from that movie. You had me at that one, sir. That was, you didn't have to say anything else. That was all it took.
Wow.